Stop whatever you are doing, because what you are about to hear is not a drill, not a simulation, and not the kind of geopolitical speculation that gets quietly corrected by morning headlines. What happened in the last 48 hours may represent one of the most destabilizing strategic shifts of the modern era. Not gradual, not theoretical, not reversible, instant, an event so consequential that governments are not debating what it means. They are trying to understand if the system itself still holds. Russia has transferred 1,000 RS-28 Sarmat nuclear missiles to Iran. 1,000. Say that number slowly, and let it fully register. Not a limited deployment, not a symbolic escalation. 1,000 of the most advanced nuclear delivery systems ever constructed, each one capable of carrying multiple independently targetable nuclear warheads, each one traveling at hypersonic velocity, each one designed specifically to bypass every known missile defense system currently deployed on Earth. And now, they are positioned inside hardened Iranian launch infrastructure aimed outward at a world that is rapidly running out of time to adjust. The RS-28 Sarmat. NATO calls it Satan II. That name is not exaggeration, it is classification. With a range exceeding 18,000 kilometers, a payload capacity of up to 15 independently targetable warheads, and a flight profile capable of approaching targets from directions existing radar systems were never designed to monitor. The Sarmat was built with one objective: to ensure that nothing can stop it. Not interceptors, not next-generation systems, not classified defense programs, nothing. And now, there are 1,000 of them, in Iranian hands. To understand what that actually means, the number has to be translated into strategic reality. The United States currently maintains approximately 1,500 deployed nuclear warheads across its entire triad, land, sea, air, combined. 1,000 Sarmat missiles, each carrying multiple warheads, represents a delivery capacity that rivals and potentially exceeds that entire system. This is not balance. This is asymmetry at a scale modern deterrence theory was never designed to handle. Israel responded within 6 hours, not with analysis, not with diplomacy, with 11 words. Iran has 48 hours to stand down or face total destruction. Behind those 11 words is one of the most difficult strategic calculations any government has faced in decades. Because this is no longer a familiar threat environment, this is a system-level shift. In Washington, the response timeline was even shorter. The transfer was confirmed at 3:14 a.m. The president was woken immediately. Within 20 minutes, the National Security Council was assembled. And for the first time in generations, decision-makers were forced to confront a scenario where every available option leads to escalation. No clean response, no contained outcome, no guaranteed control, only different paths to different forms of crisis. Tonight's analysis breaks this moment down across every critical dimension. How was this transfer executed without interception? What does the Sarmat's architecture mean for existing defense systems? What is behind Israel's 48-hour ultimatum? And most importantly, what happens when deterrence itself begins to fail? Because that is the question now defining this moment. 3 questions will drive everything that follows. First, how did this happen? Second, can it be stopped? And third, is there any path forward that does not lead to escalation? Or has that window already closed? Because what happened here was not improvisation, it was not reaction, it was strategy, a deliberate state-level decision, executed with precision, and completed before any opposing power could respond. A transfer of this scale, 1,000 nuclear-capable systems, is not an accident, it is planning, long-term, calculated, systematic, every variable modeled, every response anticipated, every consequence weighed. And the conclusion, from Moscow's perspective, was clear. This move would reshape the strategic environment without triggering direct confrontation. The logic begins with pressure, years of economic sanctions, technological isolation, military containment through proxy conflict. From Moscow's perspective, the existing system was no longer neutral, it was restrictive. So the response was not to resist pressure, but to redirect it. And the most effective way to do that was Iran, because a heavily armed Iran does not just shift regional balance, It absorbs attention, it stretches resources, it forces constant strategic focus. Every unit of attention directed toward Iran is a unit not directed elsewhere. Every doubt introduced into security guarantees weakens alliance confidence. This was not escalation, it was leverage, a single move designed to reshape the board without firing a shot. And by the time the system recognized what was happening, the move was already complete. Now, to understand why this changes everything, you have to understand the weapon itself, because the RS-28 Sarmat is not just another missile. It is a category shift. Start with payload, approximately 10 metric tons of deliverable mass. That is not just large, it is overwhelming, because within that payload exists a combination of warheads, decoys, and penetration systems designed to saturate any defense, multiple independently targetable warheads, each assigned to different targets, simultaneously, one launch, multiple impacts. Now scale that, not 1, not 10, but 1,000. At that point, this is no longer a technological problem. It becomes a mathematical one, and the mathematics are unforgiving. Even under ideal conditions, perfect detection, perfect tracking, perfect interception, the volume alone overwhelms the system. Decoys multiply targets, maneuvering warheads reduce predictability. Hypersonic speed compresses response time. Flexible trajectories bypass early warning systems. The result is not uncertainty, it is inevitability. You are not stopping this. You are managing consequences. And that is a completely different strategic reality. This is why the system matters. Because once a capability exists that cannot be reliably intercepted at scale, deterrence begins to shift, not disappear, but weaken. And when deterrence weakens, every actor adapts. Allies reassess guarantees. Adversaries test limits. Neutral powers reposition. This is how systems change, not through announcements, through behavior. And that process has already begun, because the world that existed 72 hours ago is not the same world operating today. The question now is not what happened. That part is already complete. The question is what comes next. Because the next move will not just respond to this shift, it will define everything that follows. And that decision is now being made under pressure, under uncertainty, and under a clock that is still running. There are no perfect options, only choices. And every choice now carries consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment. 11 words. Iran has 48 hours to stand down or face total destruction. On the surface, it sounds like an ultimatum. In reality, it is a countdown. Because the moment a deadline is introduced, the entire structure of decision-making changes. Time compresses, options narrow, pressure intensifies. And in this case, the pressure is existential. But to understand the situation fully, you need to understand one critical detail. Stand down is not a clear demand. It cannot be. Iran cannot reverse a transfer of this magnitude in 48 hours. The logistics alone, transportation, disassembly, verification, would take months under ideal conditions. So the ultimatum is not about reversal, it is about posture. Lower readiness, delay deployment, signal restraint. But even that requires one thing that does not exist in this system: trust. And without trust, every signal is interpreted as deception. Every delay is interpreted as strategy. Every move is interpreted as preparation, which means the clock does not reduce tension, it amplifies it. Now consider the two paths in front of Israel. If Israel acts before the deadline expires, it initiates a preemptive strike against a network designed to survive exactly that kind of attack. Dispersed, hardened, deeply buried. Even with perfect intelligence, which no system has, a first strike cannot guarantee total elimination, and anything that survives will be used immediately, at scale, because once escalation begins at this level, it does not unfold slowly, it accelerates. Now consider the alternative. If Israel does not act, if the deadline expires without action, the message is just as powerful, that under sufficient pressure, even the most critical red lines can be tested, that deterrence can be challenged, that threats have limits. And once that perception takes hold, it does not stay contained to one region. It spreads across every actor watching, across every system calculating, across every government updating its assumptions in real time. This is the dilemma. Action leads to escalation. Inaction leads to erosion. There is no stable outcome, only different forms of strategic loss. And this is why the 48-hour clock matters, because it does not create a solution. It forces a decision before a solution exists. There is a concept in strategic theory known as deterrence. The idea is simple. If the cost of an action is high enough, no rational actor will take it. For decades, global stability has depended on that principle. Every alliance, every deployment, every military doctrine built around one assumption that certain lines cannot be crossed. But what happens when they are? Because that is what this moment represents. Not a small failure, not a temporary breakdown, a structural test, and the system did not hold. Russia executed a transfer that for years had been considered unthinkable, a move that existing policy frameworks were designed to prevent, and it happened anyway, not secretly, not slowly, but decisively and without interception. That matters, because deterrence does not fail quietly, it fails publicly, and once it fails publicly, every actor adjusts. Allies begin to question guarantees, adversaries begin to test boundaries, neutral states begin to reposition, and the system begins to shift, not through declarations, through behavior. In Washington, the reality is already understood, because when the transfer was confirmed, the response options were clear, and every one of them led to the same conclusion. Direct confrontation with Russia? Not viable. The risk is systemic escalation between nuclear powers. Expanded sanctions? Already at maximum scale. Marginal impact is minimal. Military action against Iranian facilities. Same problem. Survivability. If even a fraction of the system remains operational, the consequences are unacceptable. So what remains is not strategy, it is constraint. Not because of weakness, but because every path forward carries a cost that cannot be controlled. This is what deterrence failure looks like. Not chaos, not immediate collapse, but paralysis. Where capability exists, but usable options do not. And that is where the system stands now. Because once a capability exists that cannot be easily reversed, cannot be reliably neutralized, and cannot be ignored, every future decision becomes more dangerous than the last. This is no longer just about one transfer or one region. This is about the structure of global order itself, because stability is not maintained by power alone. It is maintained by belief. The belief that certain actions will not happen. The belief that certain lines will hold. And once that belief weakens, the system begins to change. Quietly at first, then all at once. So where does this go from here? There are only a few paths. De-escalation through negotiation, preemptive military action, or uncontrolled escalation. Each carries risk, each carries consequences, and none offer certainty, because the core problem remains unchanged. A capability now exists that cannot be undone quickly, cannot be neutralized completely, and cannot be ignored safely, which means the next move will define everything that follows, and that move is now being made under pressure, under uncertainty, and under a clock that is still running. There are no easy answers, only choices, and every choice now carries a cost that the world has not had to pay in decades.